Hey everyone, in this video I'll be teaching you all of the runes knowledge you need to know to get started. If you've played Summoner's War Sky Arena before, you'll be more familiar with the runes, but I suggest you watch anyways as there are some different aspects to the runes in Lost Centuria. Starting from the basics. Besides skill stones, runes are one of the two ways you can personalize your monster. Just like in Sky Arena, runes in Lost Centuria will define the strength and power of your monster. To get runes, you need to go into territory and then complete missions at the mission office. Each mission will provide mystical dust, and higher rarity missions will provide runes as well. With the mystical dust, you can go to the craft building and craft your runes. Once you have collected runes, you can equip them on your monsters. Each monster has 3 rune slots, and when crafting a rune, you will get a rune of one of the 3 slots. Each rune has its own type, described in its name, so that when each slot of a monster has the same type of rune, you can complete a set, and the set effect gets activated. For example, here we have an energy rune. The set effect gives plus 15% HP to the monster. By putting this rune on the monster, the effect hasn't activated yet, because our remaining 2 runes have not been put on yet. Now putting on this rune, another energy rune, still doesn't activate the effect. But finally, by putting one more energy rune in the last slot, we finally activate the effect. And you can see it right here, it's been activated. So our monster just got 15% additional HP from this rune set. Now let's say we replace this rune with a fatal rune. You can see here now it says there's no set effect. So this means that for each monster, we can only activate one set effect. Now we have many different rune types available, and it's up to you to decide which effect is best for your monster. For example, let's look at Wusa. His skill is based off of max HP. So to increase his max HP, you could put an energy set for an extra 15% HP, or maybe Swift to make sure you can use his skill against the enemy Beretta, or maybe you find that he keeps getting stunned or keeps receiving debuffs, so you put an Endure rune set to increase his resistance by 30%. Now you know about rune types, let's move on to what you can get within a rune. Do you see all of these stats on Mav or any monster? These are all the stats that can show up on a rune to boost that stat. For these stats on the right column, you can only get percentage stats. For the left column, you can get either additive or percentage stats. So this makes in total 10 different stats that can show up on a rune. On each rune, you have what you call a main stat, and then you have up to 4 substats, and with a small chance, an innate stat shows up. This means that on each rune, you can have up to 6 different stats, because once a specific stat is on the rune, you can't get it again. For example, for this rune, the main stat is attack percent, so you will not get attack percent on the innate stat or the substats. Also, if the rune has an innate stat, it will have an adjective to describe it in the rune name. Here, we can see that the innate stat is plus 80 HP, and that gives us the adjective strong. There are 2 ways to upgrade each rune. First, you can power it up by using runes of the specific slot and mana stones. When you reach the next level, it upgrades the main stat. However, at each level, upgrading the rune to the next level requires more resources. The second way is by enchanting. The number on the left is the amount of times you can enchant a rune. It's usually 4 times, but if you're lucky, it can sometimes be 5. To enchant, you use enchanting scrolls, which you can get as rewards throughout the game. Enchanting a rune means the rune either gets a random new substat, or if it has 4 substats already, it will randomly pick one of the 4 substats and make it stronger. Enchanting a rune is luck based, and you have to hope that it upgrades the substat you want. Now if you paid attention, you noticed I didn't mention the innate stat. If the rune has an innate stat, there's no method to upgrade that stat, so your rune is left with that stat at that value. Before you start upgrading and enchanting, notice how each rune has a different color? Just like monsters, each rune has a different rarity, going from normal to rare to hero and to legendary. Now looking at the different rarity runes on the screen, can you spot any differences? At each rarity level, there's one more substat already available. Normal runes have 1 substat, rares have 2 substats, heroes have 3 substats, and although I don't have any legendary runes to show you, the legendary rune will have 4 substats. This means at each rarity level, you have more enchanting possibilities to upgrade your substats instead of finding new ones. There is actually also one more difference. The main stat is higher, and the possible substats are also higher in value. When upgrading different rarity runes, you also gain more per level the higher the rarity. This means that when upgrading and enchanting, the higher the rarity, the better the stats. Now I've covered everything about runes, let's go through a few tips. Tip number 1. If you have just started and don't have any good runes, just try to at least put 3 runes of the same type on your monster to give them the set effect, which by itself is already quite strong. They are also quite cheap to remove and can be replaced once you get better runes. This leads us to tip number 2. Don't upgrade or enchant runes that are rare or normal. If anything, save your resources for epic or legendary runes. Now, just because a rune is epic or legendary doesn't mean it is already worth to upgrade or enchant it. Make sure the substats are actually good for the monster you want. For example, for a damage dealer like Lucian, you want the following stats: attack percent, attack plus, crit rate, or crit damage. Like this rune I have on my Lucian, it gives crit damage, crit rate, attack percent. On the screen you should see 2 epic runes, both fatal type. One of them I would enchant, while the other I wouldn't. Can you guess which one? I would enchant this rune on the left because I could, if I get lucky, improve the attack percent or the crit damage percent, which is good for a fatal rune, whereas this rune on the right has no good substat for a damage dealer. Tip number 4. Especially later in the game when monsters have higher base stats, percentage stats are much better than their additive counterparts. But if the monster stat is lower, the additive stats could be better. For example, this rune has both plus HP stat and the plus HP percent. For my Roid, who has 2947 HP, 3.6% of that is 106, which is a lot higher than 60 HP. But for a monster like Kali with low base HP stat, 3.6% of 1782 is only 64, so a lot closer to the additive HP of 60. Tip number 5. Normally, in Sky Arena, you want runes where the main stat is the type of your monster. For example, for a damage dealer, you want an attack percent main stat, because leveling it up will upgrade your attack stat the most. However, in this game, leveling runes seems a lot more resource heavy than just enchanting them. So at least for early game, I would recommend the stats you want to be in the substat so you can enchant them and make them stronger with less resources required. For example, here's one of my Lucian runes. If attack percent was his main stat, it would take a lot more resources to get it to 14% than when I just enchanted it. Alright, that is the end of my tips and guide for runes. I hope you're able to learn something in this video. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you liked the video, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more Lost Centuria guides. I'll see you guys next time.